The story here from freerangekids.com. Now, this is actually written by Jody Allard. Free Range Kids is a site created by Lenore Skenazy, who is known as being the world's worst mother because she allowed her 10-year-old son, I believe at the time, to ride on a train.
I thought he was 11, but okay.
I think he was 10, but either way, he was allowed to ride on a train to go home from school in New York City, and there were a lot of moms and dads who thought that was terrible, and that
she didn't want him to. She wanted it upset her, but she thought the best thing to do was to put on her big girl pants and let him do it.
How else would he have gotten home?
She would have picked him up.
Okay, well, that's not always practical, because people don't get off work at 3 o'clock when school lets out.
Well, it's not an issue of practicality. Children are impractical generally. The issue is whether or not he is able to do it, and some 11-year-olds probably could handle it. Some 11-year-olds can't. Frankly, some 21-year-olds probably can't.
Right. I didn't know if, there was a school bus that was an alternative, and he decided, I don't want the school bus, I want to ride the train.
I don't know if there was a school bus or not. It was New York City. I don't know how often they have buses there, but in this case, that's what other people would have wanted. They would have wanted him to be on the school bus, or they would have wanted him to be with mother, would have wanted him to be with some sort of guardian, right? Someone who's responsible for him. And she got a lot of heat, and it was called the world's worst mom as a result, or the worst mom of the year. Maybe it was worst mom of the lifetime. I don't know. It was really bad. And she's got some really great perspectives over at Free Range Kids. How to raise safe, self-reliant children without going nuts with worry. That's the header on the website. Earlier tonight, and this article is entitled "Why Stalking Your Kids Isn't Okay" by Jody Allard. Earlier tonight, one of my teenage sons came home from his first date. He plopped down on the couch, kicked off his shoes, and told me pretty much everything. Not in graphic detail, thank God, but enough to know that he'd had his first kiss. As we talked, we briefly discussed consent, in this case, his, condoms, and his very firm belief that he isn't ready to have sex yet. After I shared a few condom tips I swear no one ever tells you until it's too late, he wandered off in search of food. Later, my teenage daughter came in to tell me that her childhood best friend forever has started hanging out with kids who smoke pot. The girl's recent birthday party was a beach bonfire, complete with weed, even while proclaiming how stupid drugs are and how sad it is her friends from middle school are doing drugs at age 14. My daughter paused to wonder why her best friend forever hadn't invited her. Exclusion hurts. Later still, all three of my teens came together to discuss a mutual friend's living situation. They were concerned it might be unsafe. After I finally managed to get everyone out of my bedroom, I replayed all of the evening's events. Sex, drugs, interpersonal relationships, but I don't think I've ever been as proud of my kids as I was tonight. I'm no expert at this parenting thing. I originally followed my own mother's approach simply because it was familiar and I assumed correct. But as my kids grew older and I grew up, the approach evolved. Originally, I had many rules, rewards, sticker charts, and punishments. My kids behaved pretty well, and I thought I was an awesome parent. Then they hit their preteen years and started telling me all of the crazy things they had been doing while I thought they were following the rules. Climbing out of windows.
The kid was 9 years old, by the way, on the subway ride home.
Okay, thank you. From Lenore Skenazy.
Yeah.
Climbing out of windows and walking along the roof to get from their room to their siblings' room, just to get out of a timeout.
Yeah. And this is the thing that'll let you know as a parent is like what's most important to me as a parent is hearing the truth. Because, I guess it probably has to do with my childhood. If I would have told my father and my mother what happened to me on the night that the murder charge all sort of happened, where my co-defendant killed somebody, if I would have told them the truth, I would have never gone to prison. And I got away with a lot of things. Up to that point, I had every reason to expect that I could lie my way out of that situation like I had lied my way out of every other situation. If my parents, how would they know, right? Like, this is the way you raise kids. You raise them to tell you lies. No, you can't tell me that information. We've had people call in and essentially say that in my day, we would never tell our parents these things. Well, I want my kid to tell me these things, whatever they are. The worst case scenario to me is that he's telling me a lie and I can't solve the problem.
Because he doesn't trust you to handle him maturely, for instance.
Sure.
Back to the story here. She says that was what really blew my mind, that, her kids were doing these crazy things just to get out of timeout. Going across the roof, that's probably pretty dangerous.
Not good.
If my kids could swing that without me or my hypervigilant ex-husband noticing, it became clear the idea of controlling my kids' behavior flat out didn't work. Since I'm not a fan of wasting my time, I tried something new. I ditched all of the rules, other than a few very basic ones that were written out and agreed to during a family meeting. I lifted all limits on screens. I got them smartphones. I made no effort to monitor their online behavior. I removed myself as a person of power and instead tried to create a new role of engaged leadership. I stopped lecturing so much and started listening more.
Right. Let's hope that I can create a situation where my son considers me to be a resource. I have gone through everything you're going to go through.
Most of it, probably, yeah.
Please let me give you advice on how to best do this. I understand you've got to be able to do things and make mistakes, and I understand I get frustrated when you go about doing things differently than I would do them, but please let me be a resource.
She says, I started listening more, and I kept talking to them about everything from something I saw on Twitter to why I was touched by an article in the news. If I was concerned about their behavior, I talked to them about it rather than creating a rule. It's been 2 years now since I dramatically changed my parenting approach. Along the way, I found my own boundaries for what I was willing to accept from my kids.
Right, and there are boundaries for me too. There's just things I just can't do that.
And I began to make that clear. There might not be many rules in our house, but I don't allow myself to be treated poorly either. Thankfully, a sense of humor goes a long way toward easing tensions all around. Recently, I've seen a surge in articles and social media posts about the need to monitor teens' behavior, especially online. And we'll tell you what some of these posts have said. They're pretty outrageous, the level of invasion that some parents are doing on their kids these days online. We'll talk about it coming up on Free Talk Live. So the mom in this article at freerangekids.com, it was posted just a few days ago. I saw it pop up on my got a little feed reader thing, and I really like this blog because I think that I appreciate the perspective where people look at young people, or in some case their children, as individuals, as people who are just young adults, or they're developing, and they don't need to have their hands held on everything forever. At some point, you got to let go. And, of course, parents are going to disagree on at what point that should be. And that's one of the reasons why Lenore Skenazy was called the world's worst mother, because she let go a lot earlier than a lot of other parents feel comfortable with by letting her 9-year-old son take himself home from school one day.
I would point out that I think that it differs for different children. I err on the side of liberty. And the reason is because I figure my son's going to spend more of his time in his life not listening to the things that I say, not being around me, not living in my house. So I have to prepare him for that life. And it doesn't mean he gets to do whatever he wants, by no means. And I think that you sort of have to set a foundation. You have to start very early. But it's a balancing act. I would also point out that the house belongs to me, and whatever rules I decide to set up are my rules.
You can set whatever rules, but what this mom's saying...
if my rule is I can shake down his room every
you can
week...
have that, yeah. Just like jail.
Yeah, just like jail,
prison.
Then I think you can do that.
However, she's pointing out that having a bunch of rules actually didn't serve her, and that it wasn't making things better. In fact, it was resulting in her kids doing even more dangerous things, like, as she pointed out, going on the house's roof to cross from one side of the structure to another because they were grounded or they were on timeout and they were supposed to stay in their room. They snuck out their window and walked over to the other kid's room.
When I was growing up, there weren't a lot of rules. And my dad actually told me, he was like, if you ever want to smoke pot, bring it here so I know that you'll be somewhere safe when you do it. And that sort of discouraged me from wanting to do it. Like,
it wasn't as bad.
Where's the fun there?
Yeah, there wasn't the sizzle of doing something that was prohibited. So she says, recently, I've seen a surge in articles and social media posts about the need to monitor teens' behavior, especially online. A friend posted about the topic, and her friend suggested everything from having all of her kids' emails forwarded to her, to viewing all of their friends' accounts on social media to see what kind of kids her kids are hanging out with. One mom reads her teens' texts every night. Another has software that monitors and tracks all internet usage. When I encounter behavior like that among parents, I wonder why stalking your child is ever considered acceptable behavior. Stalking an adult is a crime. I don't understand why doing the same thing to a child has come to be considered good parenting. She says, I also have to ask myself what the goal is. Is it to protect kids from danger? Is it to make sure they never make a mistake? In any case, it seems designed to build resentment, distrust, and hostility.
Yeah.
Imagine how you
I would imagine
react.
they're probably figuring ways to get around these things.
Of course.
Yeah.
Look, unless you're an IT professional, and even then, I would suggest that your kids can probably outsmart you when it comes to computers. You, the parent, unless you really know your stuff, there's probably some way they know about that you don't to hide whatever their tracks are, anonymize their browsing, cover up the tracks, etc.
Well, and you might recall when we had the conversation several weeks ago about the schools in Hoboken, New Jersey that are getting rid of their federally subsidized laptops, where the IT guy at the school said there's no more determined hacker than a 12-year-old with a laptop.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine how you'd react if your significant other demanded that you hand over copies of everything you did on your phone every day. Kids have privacy and autonomy too, and by the time they reach the teen years, it's time for them to start making decisions, stretching those wings, and making mistakes, doing the same stupid stuff teens have been doing for decades, all in the name of being a flawed, imperfect human who learns and grows. My kids have generally been given as much freedom as I felt they could handle. In the past, I erred on the side of caution. Now I err on the side of trust, not because I expect them never to mess up, but because I want them to have the freedom to do just that while they are still safely cared for here at home. Sometimes I shake my head at the crazy things my kids do, but being trusted to make their own choices, they've learned to trust themselves and their own judgment. Even at 16, for example, my oldest son doesn't want to learn how to drive. Instead, he takes the bus and has chosen to wait to drive until he feels ready. I know my kids won't
I shake my head too. That one too.
I know my kids won't always be on the right side of every situation like they happen to be tonight. Eventually, they may choose to have sex or try pot. And considering that 99% of the adults that I know have done both, I think they'll be just fine. A few weeks ago,
They're going to do that. And the question you want to have as a parent is, do you want to be a resource in this circumstance or do you not? Because I do.
Or do you want to be a resource or an authoritarian figure? I mean, because you don't get to choose between the two, right?
Right. You really don't. I mean, you don't. There's just none
They
of
either
that.
trust you to come to you and bring you their problems, or they don't trust you as far as they can throw you. Which one is going through their phone at night and snooping through emails with their knowledge? Is that going to breed any level of trust or appreciation from them whatsoever?
You know what I want?
No.
I want my son to do exactly the things that I imagine are the best things to do. However, perfection is not an option. We humans, what's the old saying is that good judgment comes from mistakes come from bad judgment. So, I don't remember how it goes exactly, but essentially you've got to make mistakes in order to be good at making decisions. So I guess he's going to make mistakes as much as I dislike it.
She says, a few weeks ago, I defriended my kids on Facebook. I realized that with my kids as my friends, I just wasn't free to post openly. They were horrified by my decision and gasped almost in unison, but how will we know what's going on in your life? It's simple, I told them. You can ask. So I just thought that was a neat story that, again, just sort of flies the face of the way a lot of parenting is apparently going these days. I'm interested in knowing how widespread this idea of poking through all your kids' emails and grabbing their phones at the end of the day to go through all the text messages. How common is that exactly?
I think it's fairly common, and there's a phrase or a term for that kind of parent. It's called a helicopter parent.
Well, that's not necessarily a helicopter parent. A helicopter parent was originally come out with, as I recall, with parents who would continue the parenting process of overprotection when their kids were supposed to even be gone from the house.
I thought helicopter parent was a parent that was always on top of their kid.
Yeah.
That's the word came about, as I recall. We talked about this a decade ago on Free Talk Live when I first saw the terminology. It was in reference to parents that would, for instance, want to come on a job interview with their kid. They would want to come to college.
Who does that?
They would a helicopter parent.
Well,
They would
no,
come-
it's no freaking doubt. The fact is, because so many laws have been passed that a kid can't get a job. I had a job at 12 years old. Kids don't have jobs. Of course, somebody needs help. If they're 21 years old, they've never worked a day in their life, they need help getting in.
The helicopter parent would come to college with the kid and stay there for way too long before they'd finally go home. They'd just hover around them on everything they would do when they were supposed to be an adult at that point.
Wow, that's worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, that's where the term came from. There's more coming up here at 8:55, 450 free. Your thoughts on invasive parenting. Share them with us.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.